Good morning. Today's topic of discussion is androgen and anti-androgens. Androgen is basically a generic term which includes all natural as well as synthetic steroidal drugs having masculinizing properties. The early knowledge regarding the relationship between the male sexual organ testis and the secondary sexual characters in male was obtained from the studies in castrated animals. It was demonstrated that the typical signs of castration could be reversed by transplantation of gonads. The first pure hormone with androgenic activity is androsterone, and it was isolated from male urine by a scientist Adolf Butenandt in 1931. This was followed by the isolation of urinary androgenic steroid dehydroepiandrosterone. The active principle of testis is testosterone. It was isolated in pure form in 1935, and the steroidogenesis also occurs in the ovary as well as in the adrenal cortex and the placenta. The ratio of the androgenic to anabolic activity differs from compound to compound, and these kind of compounds not only possess the androgenetic action but they are also having anabolic action that are manifested as increased protein synthesis, increased bone remodeling, and growth and stimulation of bone marrow. The natural androgens, as I mentioned before, are testosterone and 5-alpha dihydrotestosterone. These are primarily secreted by testis and responsible for development of sexual organs and secondary sex characters in a boy at puberty. The testes usually produce sperms and steroid hormones that regulate the male sexual function, and both of them actually possess under a complex feedback control of hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis, which we are going to see in the following slide. So this one is showing testosterone, the hypothalamus, from where the hormone release is gonadotropin releasing hormone, and from there the one which is synthesized from anterior pituitary are the luteinizing hormone and the follicular stimulating hormone. So this is GnRH, and here you see the division in the testis. There are two kinds of cells which are being shown here. One is Leydig cell and the other one is Sertoli cells. Now the spermatogenesis is dependent on both the primary follicular stimulating hormone and testosterone production by the Leydig cells. So the major site of follicular stimulating hormone action is the Sertoli cell, which basically regulate germ cell proliferation and maturation in seminiferous tubules. Now the testosterone appears to be essential for viability and maturation of sperms and act through testosterone receptors located in the seminiferous tubules. Now here you see when the testosterone is secreted by the Leydig cells, it will give a feedback inhibition on this release of GnRH as well as at the level of anterior pituitary. So, and the testosterone itself is responsible for the generations of the male characteristics, growth, and change in the behavior from the time of puberty, the increase in the libido and aggression in the characteristics of behavior. Now the Sertoli cell, which is primarily not responsible for the production of testosterone, is basically producing two gonadal peptides. One is inhibin B and other one is activin. This inhibin is basically regulating these are A and B, and they are heterodimeric, and these are basically controlling release of follicular stimulating hormone released from pituitary by feedback control mechanism. Whereas the activin, which is not shown here, is produced in pituitary as well as in the gonads, and it stimulates follicular stimulating hormone production. Whereas the inhibin B is the major form of inhibin in males. It is produced by Sertoli cells, and it has a negative feedback control over follicular stimulating hormone release without affecting LH release. So here most of the things are demonstrated in this curve, and you see the inhibitory action of inhibin on the follicular stimulating hormone, whereas a part of inhibin is also having some action on the synthesis of luteinizing hormone. It sounds interesting that the secretion of follicular stimulating hormone are not governed by testosterone. It has been observed that increased testosterone levels have no effect on plasma follicular stimulating hormone or FSH concentration, and atrophy or damage of seminiferous tubules reduces inhibin B production, and it leads to a selective increase in plasma follicular stimulating hormone levels irrespective of testosterone and luteinizing hormone level. That means that inhibin B is actually controlling the level of these it's controlling the level of follicular stimulating hormone synthesis irrespective of testosterone and luteinizing hormone levels. So here you will see that the pathways of synthesis of testosterone in the testes are similar to those described earlier in the adrenals, and probably it will be discussed in terms of adrenals and ovary. And here you see that GnRH is basically targeting the anterior pituitary gland to release those follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, and then they are acting on the testes and ovary. And you see the further biosynthesis of testosterone is happening from various levels. The part is produced as a testosterone, and a part is converted to estrogen, and then it's followed by the gene transcription, and those parts are undergoing action of some drugs, some of the anti-androgens. The second hormone, or the second one, is the progesterone, which is directly going through the process of gene transcription, and that is also affected or can be blocked by another drug. And lastly, the testosterone itself, which can be converted to dihydro testosterone. So before coming into the discussion of this slide, let us have a look at the following slide. This slide is actually showing the biosynthesis of testosterone, and it's coming from pregnenolone. It can occur along two distinct pathways. One pathway is through usually the 7-alpha hydroxypregnenolone to dehydroepiandrosterone, and ultimately this dehydroepiandrosterone is converted to androstenedione, and that is ultimately converted to testosterone. In human testes, the pathway this one, which has been demonstrated here, is the major pathway used for biosynthesis of testosterone. The second pathway is also through progesterone, and it's via 17-alpha hydroxyprogesterone to androstenedione. The microsomal enzyme usually acting there is 17-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, and it then catalyzes the conversion of androstenedione to testosterone. Now, the mitochondrial oxidation and the cleavage of cholesterol side chain by desmolase enzyme results in the production of the first compound, that is pregnenolone. And the reaction is basically known as the rate limiting step in the biosynthesis of testosterone. Pregnenolone is then returned to the cytoplasm, where it serves as a principal precursor of testosterone, which is basically showing in this slide. So let us go back to the previous slide. Here we are seeing that three different compounds are being produced from hypothalamus is GnRH, which is stimulating the release of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, and then ovary and testes, the different other hormones are produced. One is testosterone, the progesterone, and the estrogen, which is coming from testosterone. And you can block these things by giving some anti-androgenic drugs at different levels. And not all of them are categorized under anti-androgens, but few of them are definitely be considered as specific anti-androgenic. The anti-androgens are steroid synthesis inhibitors, which are not being shown some places. The ketoconazoles, the antifungal drugs. Another one is the 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, that is finasteride, which is shown where the testosterone is converted to dihydrotestosterone. Then comes the role of the non-competitive androgen receptor antagonist, that is called cyproterone, and the one which is a competitive androgen receptor antagonist, that is flutamide and spironolactone. These are all considered as anti-androgens. So in the next slide we will first discuss testosterone, its role in the human body and its uses and side effects and contraindications, and at the end we'll go to the topic of anabolic steroid, and then we'll discuss few of these anti-androgenic drugs. Testosterone are available in different forms, like when it is produced externally as an external source, the esters, the antecanoate, the cypionate, the enanthate. So any of the forms may be used via injectable route, and so these can be produced not only produced inside your body, but these also can be useful as a drug used in different conditions, and it is synthetically produced outside your body. So testosterone and its synthetic analogs usually act intracellularly in the target cells. This main mechanism of action are usually of two types, the direct one and the indirect one. Testosterone and its most potent metabolite, that is dihydrotestosterone, produced by 5-alpha reductase, activate the androgenic receptor, and they bring about the development of male sexual organs, prostate, increase in muscle mass, strength, and promote erythropoiesis. Whereas the indirect effects are through other active metabolites like estradiol, which is produced by its aromatization and which acts as on both the estrogen receptors. So these causes regulation of body fat and prevention of bone loss. Estrogen deficiency causes fat accumulation, mostly as intra-abdominal fat. The common androgenic actions are basically seen when you will administer testosterone in prepubertal hypogonadism, reverses most of the changes of hypogonadism. The secondary sexual characteristics develop, muscle strength increases, and the sex desires usually occur normally. The testes usually do not enlarge, and spermatogenesis does not occur with that. In female, testosterone causes increased libido as well as masculinization. The hirsutism, growth of sexual organs, the change in voice are like the male type are the common characteristic of this. The development of proliferative phase of the endometrium may be inhibited and large doses suppress the ovulation and lactation. There are certain anabolic actions which are also seen with this kind of preparations, and those are protein synthesis, anabolism, and the protein breakdown, catabolism. These are the important functions of a cell. Now, adequate supply of nutrient material is necessary for protein synthesis, and the anabolic action of androgens is demonstrated by the fact that the male is more muscular than the female, and the castration in male causes reduction in muscle mass. Testosterone promotes the nitrogen retention and increases the appetite, muscle mass, and this is basically retain nitrogen, and it increases the body weight. It is insignificant in normal healthy male adults. Usually in small doses, testosterone has some role in bones and epiphysis. It promotes growth of epiphyseal cartilage, particularly in boys. In the pituitary, it exerts a negative feedback effect, which been shown in the initial slides, and this negative feedback is going on LH as well as smaller one on FSH, and it is also having negative feedback on gonadotropic releasing hormones. Mestrolone, which is a testosterone analog, is not converted into estrogen and lacks this property. Normally, the adverse drug reactions being shown are the edema, acne. These are mostly happening in girls, and some of these changes may be irreversible. The hirsutism, polycythemia, and depression, those things also have some relations with the use of testosterone. For clinical purpose, the androgens are usually measured by radioimmune assay, and the androgenetic activity of a compound can be bioassaid by the measurement of growth of the seminal vesicles or the prostate in castrated rats, and this one is known as Hertzberger assay. Now, in Hertzberger assay, what we usually do, we usually determine the androgen is to anabolic ratio, and we used to do it by measuring the relative weights of ventral prostate and levator ani muscle of castrated male rats. The ventral prostate weight is an indicator of androgenetic effect, whereas this levator ani weight reflects its anabolic effects. And in early 2000s, this procedure was standardized, and this name Hertzberger assay was given to this procedure. Testosterone is available in different forms, as I have shown you in the previous slide. The esters, the propionate, these are mostly the injectable forms. There are some oral preparations like undecoinate. There are some transdermal patches also available in the market, and there are some nasal preparations. Testosterone nasal spray is also available with some kind of testosterone implants. SARM stands for Selective Androgen Receptor Modulator. It is recently developed novel class of androgen receptor ligands which provide customized response, that is selective anabolic effects in muscles or bones without producing androgenetic effects on prostates and testes in males. The first generation of selective androgen receptor modulator is Ostarine, which is intended mainly for osteoporosis but also for andropause. These things are orally active and usually devoid of toxicity, but it's very difficult to say how far this is going to be effective in the clinical practice. Anabolic steroids is basically it's a kind of thing where you will see the ratio between the androgen and the ratio between the androgen and the anabolic part is 1:1 normally, but here you will see in case of anabolic steroids the ratio is more than 1:1. Normally it's going, I mean the anabolic part is the more, and it is mostly going in favor of 3:1 or 4:1, like that. So those preparations are nandrolone, then comes some methanol acetate, oxymetholone, ethyl estranol, and stanozolol. So these are all the examples of anabolic steroids. In therapeutic doses, the anabolic action, as I said, is predominant, and the androgenetic effect becomes more apparent during prolonged therapy. The protein anabolism is one of the characteristic features. The anabolic steroids promote this protein anabolism. It also has some anti-catabolic effect. In short-term studies, it has been shown that it produces positive nitrogen balance in individuals on prolonged glucocorticoid therapy. However, the routine use in combination with glucocorticoids may be dangerous as adverse drug reaction due to glucocorticoid, such as hypertension, acne, hirsutism, sodium retention may flare up. It has some progestational effect, and it also has some miscellaneous actions like testosterone. But the most problematic thing is the adverse drug reactions which we encounter with these anabolic steroids. These are due to their androgenic action and similar to those produced by testosterone, and they are most likely to occur in children and females and need monitoring. The use of anabolic steroids in pregnancy has led to virilization of the fetus and advanced bone age. The orally active anabolic steroids, which have a substituted alkyl group at level of C17, may cause cholestatic jaundice and sometimes liver damage. So prolonged treatment may cause sodium and water retention. It is used therapeutically in chronic illness like HIV cachexia, in case of growth, to promote growth in hypogonadal children. It may be used in renal failures, especially in chronic renal failure in different stages, and in anemias where they claim to be effective in certain refractory anemias associated with bone marrow hypoplasia and aplasia. The most problematic thing with this particular thing is abuse, and this abuse is mostly happened in case of athletes. I can remember the name of Ben Johnson, who had taken this anabolic steroids in 1987. He won the Olympic gold medal, but this was been taken out from him because of he was found guilty of taking anabolic steroids. And another victim of this anabolic steroid is Florence Griffith Joyner, who actually died due to some cardiac problems which happened due to prolonged use of these anabolic steroids, and she was also a kind of 4 gold medal winner in probably in 1994 Olympics. The anti-androgens already being named, few of them are ketoconazoles, finasteride, cyproteron, and competitive androgen receptor antagonists like flutamide and spironolactone. Finasteride and sildenafil, these two are the most important thing, and you should go through this. Beside these two, we'll discuss these two separately, but the other ones like cyproteron and flutamide, out of which the flutamide is a non-steroidal anti-androgen usually given orally, and it acts as a competitive antagonist at the level of androgen receptor. It has been shown in the probably in the third slide. Spironolactone, as you know, it's an aldosterone antagonist, which is basically used as a diuretic, but it blocks the binding of androgen to the androgen receptor and competitively at the level of the follicle. In larger doses, it also inhibits the synthesis of androgen in the ovaries. Whereas the cyproteron is a potent progesterogenic and moderately potent anti-androgenic drug, which is having a mild glucocorticoid action. The adverse drug reactions which have happened with cyproteron usually are physical demasculinization, gynecomastia, galactorrhea, and sexual dysfunction. Normally, the cyproteron is used orally, 50 to 100 milligram dose, to reduce libido and sexual potency in deviant hypersexuality in males, and it also been used in precocious puberty in boys. So these a little bit about the anti-androgens, and now we are coming to the topic of the finasteride, and which is very closely related to this is a condition where finasteride is very commonly used, that is benign hypertrophy of prostate or benign prostatic hyperplasia. Usually this benign prostatic hyperplasia has two components: a static component that is related to the enlargement of the prostate, obstructing urethra, and a dynamic component that represents the tone or the degree of contraction of the smooth muscle, and it is happened within the prostate. It is mediated by alpha 1 adrenergic receptor, and it is increase in benign hypertrophy of prostate, and it's happened due to increase in muscle mass, and these resist the urine outflow. Now these drugs, finasteride like drugs, not only finasteride but the dutasteride is another drug, is basically a 5 alpha reductase inhibitor. This prevents the conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. Now this drug is inhibiting the formation of dihydrotestosterone and effective only in patients with palpably enlarged prostate, whereas if you use some kind of alpha 1 adrenergic antagonist like tamsulosin, which are very effective in patients even without such enlargement. Finasteride in low doses is, in the 1 milligram dose, is also effective in alopecia, mostly in androgenetic alopecia. So in benign hypertrophy of prostate, the dose is 5 milligram daily, whereas in androgenetic alopecia, dose is 1 milligram daily. The adverse drug reactions which we encounter with finasteride is excretion in the semen, and use of protective barrier is recommended if the partner is pregnant or is likely to become pregnant. It is contraindicated in patients with obstructive uropathy or cancer of the prostate. So these are the limitations of finasteride. Whereas the other one, sildenafil, which is not used in case of benign prostatic hyperplasia, but it's one of its derivative which is having similar kind of action, that is tadalafil, which is having a longer duration of action, can be used in small doses in benign hypertrophy of prostate. But mostly sildenafil and tadalafil are your drugs which are used in sexual dysfunctions. Now sexual dysfunctions are usually of different types. One is called the erectile dysfunction, which is happening in males. The normal erectile response is mediated by a combination of psychogenic, that is central, and reflexogenic action, that is the peripheral stimuli. And CNS plays a very important role by either stimulating or inhibiting the spinal pathways that mediate erectile function. Now the parasympathetic input to the male sexual organ, that is the it's not the main sexual organ, the parasympathetic input to the penis is proerectile, whereas the sympathetic input is anti-erectile. Emission, which is a deposition of the seminal fluid into the posterior urethra, is regulated by the activation of sympathetic system. The proerectile afferent stimuli from the perineum and the lower urinary tract to the penis, and the efferent ejaculatory stimuli to the levator muscle are carried through somatic sacral reflex arc. The basic mechanisms involved in erectile dysfunctions are failure to initiate due to psychological or endocrinological or neurogenic causes, failure to fill blood into the cavernosa, and it is due to arteriogenic causes, and failure to hold adequate blood volume in the corpus cavernosum. These usually happen due to vaso-occlusive dysfunction. Usually the physiological mechanism of erection involves the release of nitric oxide from the vascular endothelium and the nitrogenic nerves into the corpora cavernosa of the penis during sexual stimulation. Now this NO activates the enzyme guanylate cyclase, which results in increased level of cyclic guanosine monophosphate, which produces smooth muscle relaxation in the corpora cavernosa and the penile arteries, and it is allowing the inflow of blood. The cyclic GMP is metabolically degraded by the enzyme called phosphodiesterase 5 and is present in the corpora cavernosa. It has some isoenzymes which are present in other tissues like phosphodiesterase 3 in the heart, phosphodiesterase 6 in the retina. So the people who are getting phosphodiesterase 5 inhibitor might have some adverse drug reactions due to the inhibition of all these types of other isoenzymes placed in the different other organs. In addition to NO, locally synthesized prostaglandin F2 alpha and prostaglandin E2 also contribute to the relaxation of cavernosal smooth muscle cells, and that is happening physiologically. Now the management, as I said, are usually done with the sildenafil like drug, which is given at a dose of 25 to 50 milligram after seeing the blood pressure and ECG of the person who is actually going to take this. Usually the person has to take it 1 hour before food and 1 hour before the sexual intercourse, and this drug is basically such a thing that its action will last for 4 hours. The common thing which one has to look at this matter is a headache, and it is happening due to vasodilatation. Sildenafil causes severe headache and nasal congestions. These two things are very commonly happening with sildenafil. Priapism is rarely seen with that. If a hypotensive effect is already been seen, or if the person is on nitrate because of angina, administration to those persons basically going to be dangerous. Occasionally it impairs bluish tinge to vision due to its inhibitory effect on phosphodiesterase 6 in the retina, and sometimes it's been shown that this drug is causing non-arteritic ischemic optic neuritis, which is abbreviated as NAION, NAION, and it is leading to acute loss of vision. The other drugs from the same group are vardenafil and tadalafil. The action of tadalafil is long acting. All phosphodiesterase inhibitors can potentiate hypotension, especially when used concurrently with alpha blockers such as doxorubicin or tamsulosin, which are often prescribed in benign hypertrophy of prostate. One thing one has to keep in mind that in myocardial